It was a Tuesday. I remember because the garbage trucks were rumbling down the street, a sound I had woken up to for 30 years. But that Tuesday was different. That was the day I packed my bags and chose myself. The sun was streaming through my bedroom window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. They looked so free. I stood there for a long time, just watching them. My suitcase was at the back of the closet, hidden behind winter coats and old memories. It was covered in a fine layer of dust, a silent witness to a life I had put on hold. As I pulled it out, the zipper made a sound that seemed to echo through the quiet house. It was the sound of something ending, and something else, something terrifying and new, beginning. I was not crying. I was not angry. A strange, quiet calm had settled over me. It was the kind of peace that comes only after a long and painful storm. The decision had been made not in a dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small, silent ones leading up to this day. My hands were steady as I opened the drawers. I folded my clothes neatly, each item a piece of a life I was leaving behind. I did not pack the family photos. I did not pack the quilt my mother had made for me. I packed only what was mine, and mine alone. It did not take long to fill the suitcase. It was surprising, really, how little a life amounts to when you strip away the obligations. When you remove the weight of other people's expectations, you find you can travel very light. I looked at the half-empty case and felt a pang, not of loss, but of clarity. This was not an act of running away. This was an act of walking towards something, even if I could not yet see what it was. I was choosing the unknown over a familiar kind of loneliness. I was choosing my own peace over a shared war. I zipped the bag closed. The sound was final. I took one last look around the room that had been my sanctuary and my prison. Then, I picked up my suitcase, walked out the front door, and did not look back. The car started on the first try. I had half expected it to refuse, as if the house itself was trying to keep me there. I pulled away from the curb, watching the home I had loved fade in the rearview mirror. It looked smaller than I remembered. For the first time in years, I did not have a list of errands to run. I did not have a meal to prepare for someone else. I had no destination, only direction. Away. I drove until the familiar streets turned into highways, and the highways stretched out into open fields. The knot in my chest, one I had carried for so long I almost forgot it was there, began to loosen. I rolled down the window and let the cool air wash over me. It smelled of rain and wet earth, a clean smell. I thought about my son, David. I wondered if he had come home from work yet. I wondered if he had found the note I left on the kitchen table. It was not a long letter. I did not have the energy for long explanations. I simply wrote that I loved him, but I needed to find myself again. I hoped he would understand one day. I knew he would be angry first. He would feel betrayed. His wife, Chloe, would probably be relieved. The thought should have hurt more than it did. But in that moment, with the open road ahead, all I felt was a profound and aching relief. I was 58 years old. And for the first time since I was a young woman, I was completely and utterly alone. But this aloneness did not feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. It felt like I had been holding my breath for decades and had finally, let it out. To understand why I left, you have to understand what I was leaving. My name is Eleanor. For 30 years, I lived in that house on Maple Street. I raised my son there. I watched him take his first steps in that living room. I held him when he had nightmares in that hallway. I packed his lunches at that kitchen counter. Every corner of that house was filled with the echoes of a life built around someone else. That was a choice I made gladly. After my husband, Michael, passed away when David was just 10, my world shrank to the size of my boy. He was my purpose. My everything. I worked 2 jobs to keep us in that house, to give him a stable home. I missed school plays sometimes. I was often tired. But seeing him graduate, get into a good college, become a man, it was my greatest pride. I thought that was the entire story of my life. The mother. The widow. The pillar of quiet strength. Then David met Chloe. She was bright and ambitious, with a sharp laugh that could fill a room. I was happy for him. Truly, I was. He seemed so alive when he was with her. They got married in a beautiful ceremony. I sat in the front row, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. When they asked if they could move in with me while they saved for a house, I didn't hesitate. The idea of the house being full again, of having a family, was a dream come true. I cleared out the upstairs rooms for them. I cooked their favorite meals. I tried so hard to be the perfect mother-in-law, the helpful grandma-in-waiting. I wanted to be a blessing, not a burden. The first few months were a honeymoon period. We had family dinners. We watched movies together. Chloe would ask me for recipes. It felt like I had gained a daughter. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. The dynamic shifted. I was no longer the matriarch of the home. I was a guest in my own house. Decisions were made without me. What to have for dinner, what color to paint the living room, which television service to subscribe to. My opinions were met with polite smiles and then ignored. "Don't worry about it, Mom," David would say. "We've got it handled." Their earwee always felt like a wall I was on the wrong side of. Chloe started redecorating, replacing my old, comfortable things with sleek, modern furniture. My worn-out armchair, the one Michael had loved, was the first to go. "It's just so dated, Eleanor," as she said, not unkindly. It felt like she was erasing me, piece by piece. I started spending more time in my room, just to stay out of the way. The house felt crowded, yet I had never felt more invisible. I was the live-in babysitter for a child that did not exist yet. The unpaid cook and cleaner for a family that was slowly closing its circle around me. The loneliness inside that full house was a specific kind of torture. I would sit at the dinner table and listen to them talk about their days, their friends, their plans for the future, plans that I was not a part of. They would use acronyms from their offices, share jokes I didn't understand. I would just smile and nod, pushing my food around my plate. I tried to talk about my day, about the book I was reading or the neighbor I had chatted with, but the conversation would always drift back to them. I felt like a ghost, fading away in the very place I had fought so hard to keep. David became different too. He was still my son, but he was Chloe's husband first. He deferred to her in everything. I understood that, in principle, a man should prioritize his wife. But it felt like he was prioritizing her at the complete exclusion of me. My feelings, my comfort, my place in my own home no longer seemed to matter to him. He stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as his tenant. A tenant who paid no rent but cost a great deal in emotional space. The hope for a grandchild was the final thread I clung to. I thought, when a baby comes, things will be different. I will be needed again. I will have a role. I started knitting little booties. I bought a beautiful children's book from a second-hand shop. One evening, I mentioned it over dinner. "I was thinking," I said, "the room next to yours would make a lovely nursery. It gets the morning sun." There was a heavy silence. David looked down at his plate. Chloe put her fork down carefully. "Eleanor," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We're not having children. We've decided it's not for us." The words landed like a physical blow. David wouldn't meet my eyes. All the air went out of the room. All my quiet, cherished dreams for the future, reading stories, baking cookies, parsing on family traditions, shattered in that single moment. The family line, the legacy I had worked so hard to preserve, ended with me, in that silent, sunlit dining room. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I got up and cleared the plates, my hands trembling. That night, in the silence of my room, I cried for the grandchildren I would never hold. And I began, for the very first time, to cry for myself. After the conversation about children, a chill settled over the house. It was as if I had committed a transgression by wanting a grandchild. My presence, which had once been tolerated, now seemed to be an active irritation. Chloe's comments became less gentle, more pointed. She would sigh loudly if I left a cup in the sink. She would rearrange the kitchen cabinets I had just organized, muttering about efficiency. I felt like I was constantly being graded, and I was always failing. I started tiptoeing around my own home, afraid to make a sound, afraid to leave a trace. I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome, and everyone knew it but me. The small tensions began to stack up like bricks, building a wall between us. One Saturday, I was watching my favorite program, a gentle gardening show I never missed. Chloe came in and, without a word, picked up the remote and changed the channel to a home renovation show. "You don't mind, do you, Eleanor?" as she asked, already sitting down. "This one is really inspirational." I minded. I minded so much. But I just smiled weakly and said, "Of course not, dear." I went upstairs and sat on my bed, feeling foolish and old. It was just a television show, but it wasn't. It was about respect. It was about my right to exist in my own space. David never seemed to notice these small power plays. Or if he did, he chose not to see them. When I tried to talk to him about it once, he was dismissive. "Mom, you're being too sensitive," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Chloe just has a strong personality. She doesn't mean anything by it." His words hurt more than Chloe's actions. My own son was invalidating my feelings. He was choosing to believe I was imagining the tension, rather than acknowledging that his wife was making his mother feel unwelcome. The final straw, the one that broke the camel's back, was often a collection of tiny, insignificant things. It was the way they would go out for dinner and not invite me. It was the way they would have whispered conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. It was the birthday. My 58th birthday. I had made a simple dinner, a roast chicken, hoping we could eat together. I waited for them to come home. And I waited. The chicken grew cold and dry in the oven. Finally, at 8 o'clock, I got a text from David. "Sorry, Mom, got caught up at work. Chloe and I are grabbing a bite downtown. Don't wait up." I sat alone at the big dining table, in the silent house, and ate a slice of cold, tough chicken. There was no cake. No card. No recognition that the day was any different from the others. They had forgotten. Completely and utterly forgotten. I looked around at the empty chairs, at the walls that held so many memories, and I felt a profound, soul-crushing loneliness. This was not a home. This was a house where I happened to sleep. I was not a mother or a grandmother. I was a relic. A piece of furniture that was no longer in style. The realization did not come in a dramatic flash. It seeped into me slowly, over the following days. I would look at my son and see a polite stranger. I would look at my daughter-in-law and see a woman who saw me as an obstacle to her perfect life. The love I felt for them became tangled with a deep, aching hurt. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night, listening to the sounds of the house, and my mind would race. What was my purpose? What was I still doing here? I had spent my entire life defining myself through my relationships to others, Michael's wife, David's mother. Now, those roles felt hollow. Who was I, just as Eleanor? I didn't know the answer. And that was the most frightening thing of all. The urge to leave, to just walk away, began as a whisper in the back of my mind. At first, I dismissed it as a crazy, selfish thought. But the whisper grew steadily louder, until it was all I could hear. It was a quiet, persistent drumbeat in my soul. Go. 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 The turning point was not a loud argument. It was not a slammed door or a shouted curse. It was a conversation so quiet, so civil, it was chilling. It was a Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. David and Chloe were in the living room, looking at brochures for houses. I could hear their excited voices. "This one has a great open plan layout," Chloe said. "And look, the master bedroom is huge." My heart gave a little leap. Maybe this was it. Maybe they had found their dream home. Maybe once they moved out, I could have my house and my life back. We could go back to a healthy distance, with weekly visits and Sunday dinners. A wave of hope washed over me. I finished the dishes and walked into the living room, drying my hands on a towel. "Found something you like?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. They looked up, their expressions a little guarded. "Yeah, a few possibilities," David said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. There was a pause. Chloe looked at David, a silent message passing between them. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Actually, Mom," David began, clearing his throat. "We wanted to talk to you about the future." I sat down in my armchair, the new, uncomfortable one that had replaced Michael's. "Of course," I said, my hope beginning to curdle into anxiety. "We've been thinking," Chloe said, taking over. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were like steel. "When we buy a house, it's going to be a big financial commitment. This house is too big for one person, and the upkeep is expensive." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "We think it would be best, for everyone, if we put this house on the market." The world seemed to slow down. The words of "put this house on the market" echoed in my mind. My house. The house I had worked for. The house where I had built a life with Michael. The house where I had raised David. They were going to sell it. From under me. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. David shifted uncomfortably. "It makes financial sense, Mom. The proceeds from the sale would give you a nice nest egg. You could get a small apartment somewhere. Something manageable." He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. He was selling my home and framing it as a thoughtful retirement plan. "An apartment?" I said, my voice trembling. "David, this is my home." "It's our home, Mom," he corrected me gently, and the correction felt like a knife. "And we all need to move forward." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I searched his face for any sign of the little boy who had clung to me when he was scared. I searched for any understanding of what he was asking me to give up. There was nothing there but a cool, practical resolve. He had discussed this with his wife. They had made a plan. I was the last one to be informed. I was a logistical problem to be solved. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, final snap. The last thread of hope, the last belief that I still had a place in my son's life, severed. The love was still there, a dull, aching pain in my chest, but the obligation, the need to stay, vanished. I looked from David's resigned face to Chloe's determined one, and I understood everything. I was not part of their we. I never would be again. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The calm that settled over me was absolute. I simply nodded. "I see," I said, my voice now steady and quiet. "Thank you for telling me your plans." I stood up. They looked surprised, perhaps even disappointed that I hadn't put up a fight. They had prepared for an emotional scene, and my calmness disarmed them. "I'm tired," I said. "I think I'll go to bed now." I walked out of the room and up the stairs. I did not go to bed. I went to my closet. I pulled out the dusty suitcase. And I started to pack. The decision was made. They wanted me to leave this house? Fine. I would leave. But I would leave on my own terms. I would not wait for them to sell my memories out from under me. I would not go quietly into some small, manageable apartment they had chosen for me. If I was going to be alone, I would be alone somewhere of my own choosing. That night, as I folded my life into a suitcase, I was not a victim. I was not a rejected mother. For the first time in decades, I was an agent of my own destiny. And it was the most empowering and the most heartbreaking feeling in the world. The first few weeks after I left were a blur of strange landscapes and unfamiliar motel rooms. I drove without a clear destination, following back roads and my own whims. I ended up in a small, quiet coastal town. The sound of the ocean was a constant, soothing whisper. I rented a little furnished cottage, so different from my big house on Maple Street. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a window that looked out onto the sea. It was the perfect size for one. For me. The silence here was different. It wasn't the heavy, lonely silence of my old house. This silence was peaceful. It was mine to fill or to enjoy. The guilt was the hardest part to outrun. It followed me like a shadow. Was I a terrible mother? Had I abandoned my son? I had nightmares where David was a little boy again, crying for me, and I was walking away. I would wake up with a start, my heart pounding, the sound of the waves a strange comfort. I thought about calling him 1,000 times. My finger would hover over his number on my phone. But what would I say? I was not ready to apologize for choosing myself. And I knew he would not be ready to understand. So I stayed silent. I had to let the wound breathe before I could even think about trying to heal it. I had to learn how to be Eleanor again. Not David's mom. Not Michael's widow. Just Eleanor. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I started taking long walks on the beach every morning. I would collect seashells, not for anyone, just because I liked their shapes and colors. I started reading books I had always meant to read. I joined a small local library and became a regular. I even signed up for a watercolor painting class for seniors. I was terrible at it. My skies were always too grey, my seas too turbulent. But I loved it. It was a mess I was making for myself, and no one was there to judge it. I made small, tentative connections. I chatted with the woman who ran the local grocery store. I had coffee with a few ladies from my painting class. They knew nothing about my past. They didn't know I was a mother or a widow. They just knew me as Eleanor, the lady in the cottage by the shore who liked to paint. It was liberating. For the first time, my relationships were not defined by my history. I was building a present, all my own. I learned to cook for one, making simple, satisfying meals. I learned to enjoy my own company. The loneliness would still visit sometimes, as it does for everyone, but it was no longer a permanent resident in my soul. It was just a passing guest. About 2 months after I left, my phone rang. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. I needed to gather my strength. His message was short. His voice was strained. Mom. It's me. Please call me back when you get this. We need to talk. I waited a day. I went for my walk. I painted a particularly bad picture of a seagull, and then I called him back. The conversation was stiff and formal at first. He told me they had taken the house off the market. He said it hadn't felt right. He asked me where I was. I didn't tell him. I just said I was safe and I was happy. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I miss you, Mom, he said, and his voice cracked. Those 4 words undid me. All my resolve, all my newfound strength, melted away in the face of that simple, heartfelt admission. I missed him too. More than I could possibly say. We started talking, once a week at first. The conversations were careful, like we were walking on broken glass. We didn't talk about Chloe much. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about the weather. About my painting class. About his work. It was a start. It was a bridge being built, one fragile plank at a time. He never asked me to come back. And I never offered. I knew I could never go back to living in that house, under those conditions. That chapter was closed. but perhaps a new kind of relationship could be written. One based on two separate, whole people who loved each other, not on obligation and dependence. The forgiveness was a slow process. It didn't happen in a single moment. It happened every time I chose to answer his call. It happened every time I heard the care in his voice, a care I hadn't heard in years. I forgave him not for his sake, but for my own. I could not carry the weight of that hurt into my new, peaceful life. Letting it go was the final act of choosing myself. It has been a year now since I packed my bags and walked away. I am still in my little cottage by the sea. This is my home now. It is filled with my seashells, my bad paintings, and my peace. The relationship with David is healing. He came to visit me a few months ago. Alone. It was the first time we had seen each other since I left. He looked older, more tired. We hugged for a long time on my doorstep, neither of us wanting to let go. We didn't talk about the past. We walked on the beach. We drank tea in my small kitchen. He seemed to see me, really see me, for the first time in years. He saw that I was happy. I was calm. I was myself. As he was leaving, he turned to me and said, "You look good, Mom. You look light." And I am. I have learned that family is not a place. It is not a house on Maple Street. It is a bond that can stretch across miles and silence and hurt. It can change shape, and that's okay. My family now is the quiet connection with my son. It is the friendly wave from my neighbor. It is the community I have built for myself, piece by piece. I learned that being alone does not mean being lonely. In fact, learning to be comfortably alone is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It means you are complete, all by yourself. You do not need another person to validate your existence. The moral of my story is not that you should pack your bags and leave your family. The moral is that you must never lose yourself within it. For so long, I thought my value came from what I could do for others. From the meals I cooked, the home I maintained, the love I gave. I thought self-sacrifice was the highest form of love. I was wrong. The highest form of love, both for others and for yourself, includes respect for your own spirit. You cannot pour from an empty cup. I had run myself dry trying to fill the cups of others, and they didn't even seem to be thirsty for what I was offering. My journey taught me about quiet strength. True strength isn't about enduring pain in silence. It's about having the courage to change your life when that pain becomes too much to bear. It's about walking away from a situation that is diminishing you, even when every part of you is screaming that it's selfish. Choosing yourself is not a selfish act. It is an act of survival. It is an act of profound self-respect. I had to leave to remember who I was. I had to be alone to realize that I was enough, all by myself. If you are listening to this, and you are in a place where you feel unseen, unappreciated, or taken for granted, I want you to know this. Your feelings are valid. Your need for peace and respect is not too much to ask. It is your birthright. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. It is okay to step back. It is okay to create boundaries. It is okay to choose a path that leads to your own happiness, even if others don't understand it at first. Your story does not have to end where it began. You can always choose to turn the page. As for me, my story continues. The waves still crash on the shore outside my window. The sun still rises over the water each morning, painting the sky in colors I am still learning to capture with my brushes. My life is simple. It is quiet. And it is deeply, profoundly mine. The day I packed my bags and chose myself was not the end of my life. It was the beginning. And for that, I will be forever grateful. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe, like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.